Hello, everybody, and welcome into another edition of the Bleeding Burnt Orange live show, the 32nd edition here on Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, coming from the SEC and the Texas channel. Please do me a favor, guys. Hit that like button and subscribe immediately. I'm here every Wednesday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, talking Texas football. I really appreciate for you guys being here. Like I said, hit that like button and subscribe. And before we jump into things, guys, let's talk about ticketsmarter.com. Type in code BIG for $10 off a purchase of $100 or more. And then type in code BIG20 for $20 off a purchase of $300 or more. I really appreciate that, guys. So please do that. If you're gonna go out and buy tickets that can be expensive, why not save yourself some money? So do that. Hit that like button, subscribe down below. It really helps out the channel, guys. Thank you so much for being here. Again, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time every Wednesday, talking the Texas Longhorns. And I am your host, Matthew Miller. Let's jump into these comments real quick. Joey Foster, let's go Mountaineers. Chris Cobb, A&M is the best in the SEC. Horns down, Dream on. Okay. TU will be average in the SEC. So we're going to get into that slightly. Today, we will be ranking coaches in the SEC. Last week, I talked about what I thought Texas was going to do in the SEC, broke down the schedule. I'm going to do that monthly, just like a temperature check of what I think they're going to go in the SEC next year. It's going to be fun, exciting new league to join, new competition, new places to visit. I am excited about it. And let's jump in, guys. So Texas hires a new general manager. First off, I didn't even hear of Billy Glasscock, and so I looked down on my phone a couple days ago, and he was poached by Ole Miss. And I think it's kind of funny at this point. Lane Kiffin is on Twitter giving SARK all this praise, liking a lot of comments, retweeting stuff, and they're clearly friends. And then he goes and hires our general manager. So that's kind of a sign of mutual respect, but it's also like, come on, Lane, why? Why do you have to do that? Billy Glasscock was at Texas since the beginning of the Steve Sarkisian era, the last 3 years. I think he's done a pretty good job. I have to give him some credit with this roster, just like I have to give Steve Sarkisian developing this roster and the assistant coaches with developing this roster. So I think Ole Miss got a good hire in Billy. He worked with North Carolina State and Minnesota previously since 2014. He started at Minnesota, went to North Carolina State, did the same thing. He was the head of recruiting activities, basically, and he got a new title and general manager with Texas, and he will be that with Ole Miss. And Texas hires Brandon Harris, who has been there since 2019 as an analyst. He was the director of recruiting this year, and now he's the general manager. And this is kind of like Steve Sarkisian said today in his press conference, a jack of all trades. If I can't be in a meeting, this is the guy I send. This is the guy that sits in the meeting and I trust. This is the guy that probably watches some tape of portal guys and high recruits or low-level recruits and puts his input and says, I think this guy fits here this way, stuff like that. Probably talks to people as well. So I think it's a big role. I don't think this is general manager NFL style where I have the final say over a head coach. It's not. Let's be honest here. It's kind of the opposite in college. I think this is a guy you bounce ideas off of. This is a guy that you mind melt with. You see where he's coming from, what he thinks is best way for the program, and hopefully he gets along with the kids as well and pass them along to the coach. So and see if they agree on a prospect or disagree and why they agree or why they disagree. I think it's that sort of thing. It's definitely not like, again, the NFL, where the NFL final say, if in well-run organizations, the general manager typically gets the final say. Like, I want to draft this guy. I want to draft this guy. Well, I'm the general manager. I'm drafting this guy. That's how it's supposed to work in good organizations. That isn't how it is here. If Steve Sarkisian doesn't want to give a kid a scholarship, he's not going to get a scholarship. Brandon Harris is not going to have say over him. Now, I will say in certain situations, I wouldn't mind if it's a 50-50 if Steve Sarkisian doesn't know and he's like, hey, Brandon, your call. I have no issue with that because I think the more minds you have and the more diversity of thought you have on a situation, you end up with the best outcome. So I have no issue with this hire. I think it's a decent hire. He is pretty young. I think he's only 33 years old. So, or he'll be 33 by the time the season kicks off. But he has a lot of experience. He played quarterback at LSU. He's been an analyst, so I have no issue with this. I don't think it's like I said, a gigantic deal. I do think it's like, if I'm grading this on a scale of how big of a deal it is, it's like an C. It's an average. And the hire I thought was a B minus. I think he's good. I don't think he's great because he's not proven, but he could prove me wrong. So far, everything Steve Sarkisian has done has worked out, because when Steve Sarkisian got here, I thought he was a C+ hire, but then with the staff he hired, he turned into an A hire, and so far that's turned out. He's done a fantastic job. So we'll talk about Steve Sarkisian's press conference. It is National Signing Day for anyone that didn't know, even though Texas signed zero, I repeat, zero recruits today. None. Not a zilch. So that's crazy to me. This used to be a national holiday. I remember middle school, even high school, literally sitting down after school watching, hoping Texas would get the best recruits they possibly could, being on my phone, seeing some guys flip from Texas, seeing guys flip to Texas, and being super excited about the trajectory of the program. And now it's not, guys. Like, this is just a normal day. Like, most people probably even know this was National Signing Day because it doesn't matter anymore. The early signing day is National Signing Day. Most of the guys, other than Terry Bussey, who was a 5-star who I think ended up going to A&M. I know he was recruited there heavily. I know he was committed. I think he finally signed today. Most of them were 3-star recruits, and Texas didn't even get anyone because they had done all their work. Hell, guys, they had 30 guys between the transfer portal and recruiting that they had. I think Steve Sarkisian said in his press conference they had 25 guys already on campus. There's only 4 or 5 guys left that need to get on campus. That's crazy. So you had 0 guys sign on National Signing Day, and most of your class is already on campus. That's insane to me. He also talked about the desire to win at Texas. He talked about how this isn't just another job. I didn't just take this for the shits and gigs. I'm here to win a national championship. And I got a little bit of taste of that last year, and I didn't succeed, and I won it back. He said, complacency is the devil. And I mean, a little bit harsh there. I think complacency is getting a little bit of a negative. Like, it is bad, but is it the devil? Probably not. But I did like the saying because it does matter, guys. Like, when you set the standard that he has set of we won the Big 12 championships for the first time since 2009, and we've won 12 games. Like, that is the standard now, guys. To me, Texas has to be in the top 12 every year of this college football playoff under Steve Sarkisian. They have to. They have the resources. They have the coach, in my opinion. They have the talent and recruiting bed in the state of Texas. They have to be in the top 12. And with the transfer portal, you can reload. We saw what Texas did. They lost A.D. Mitchell and Xavier Worthy. Guess who they got? They got Matthew Golden, Silas Bolden, and Isaiah Bond on top of Amari Niblack coming in for Jatavian Sanders. And you already have Gunnar Helm coming back, plus Quinn Ewers coming back. And then guys on defense like a Trey Moore off the edge, Andrew Makuba at the safety position. This is the University of Texas. They have to make the top 12 every year. And he talked about stop the complacency. As Nick Saban said, it's rat poison. Don't take it and use it as motivation. And that's what I hope they did. I hope this is just like a Michigan situation where they get in twice and they fail. And then guess what happens this year? They win a national championship. I hope that taste is sour in their mouths because they did not play a good game versus Washington, and they had more to leave on that field. They really did. They played a C-plus game. Washington played a B-minus game. I don't think Washington played their best game either. That game was there for the taking because of some boneheaded decisions by Kalen DeBoer, who we'll talk about later in the SEC coach rankings. So I hope that taste is there. I hope the offseason they can use that fuel and motivation to get better and come back and compete or win the SEC. I think the goal is to be in the SEC championship game. I think you have the talent for that. I think you have the coach for that. I think everything is lining up, guys, for that to happen for Texas. I think Quinn Ewers is either the best or second best quarterback returning in the country. I think it's either him or Carson Beck. And the last time you could say that was when Colt McCoy was here. And the time before that, it was Vince Young. So both those times that team was able to get to a national championship. I think that should be the goal this year is a national championship. I think at minimum, this team has to make the college football playoff. I think the max of this team right now is the national championship. Next up, what else he talked about? Obviously, Arch Manning coming back to sit for another year. Quinn is going to be the starter. He flat out said it today. He said Arch is going to follow his path. Arch is going to follow a different path than some guys. You know, not every great player has to follow the same path. They don't have to play the same they don't have to play as a freshman. They can start as a sophomore. They can start as what he's going to be, a redshirt sophomore / junior. So as long as he's ready when that opportunity comes, and guys, I fully expect him to play 1 or 2 games this year because Quinn Ewers has not been fully healthy for a whole season. I think that's another thing Quinn needs to work on is his health, because if you're missing 3 to 4 games a year, the NFL is going to dock you for that. And Steve Sarkisian flat out said, Quinn's a starter. There's no competition. And I like that because that's how it should be. Quinn is ahead of Arch Manning last year. It's really hard for me to believe that Quinn going into what I think will be his final season at Texas is going to be overtaken for a guy that hasn't taken any snaps in a live or hasn't taken any meaningful snaps in a live game other than Texas Tech. So Steve Sarkisian says what all us Texas fans know, what all the other morons, honestly, outside of the program don't know. Quinn Ewers is going to be the starter next year. There's no competition. He will be the starter, and we're all behind him in that. I see no reason why he wouldn't be the starter. He's coming back with a lot of talent around him, plus the offensive line, 4 out of 5 starters returning. He should be, and he will be the starter. And then another thing, someone asked him, building around the strengths of your team because you lost a lot of people. I freaking love this answer. I am going to call the game and build around the strengths of whatever this team is. This team there's some similarities between last year's team and this year's team, but they're a whole new team. That last year's team may be better at certain aspects than this year's team, but this year's team may be better at other aspects. And that's the thing Steve Sarkisian needs to find out. That's what this whole time before the season starts is: spring ball, fall practices, summer practices, everything like that is going to be used to determine what this team does well. Now, just based off what I see on paper, I think you're going to have to throw it a little bit more than last year. I do like Jaden Blue and CJ Baxter. I think they're a great running back tandem. I think they're a top 5, top 6 running back tandem in the country. But you have Quinn Ewers coming back in his 3rd year starting behind 4 out of 5 starting offensive linemen, one of which, Kelvin Banks, is going to be a top 20 pick in the NFL draft. I think Jake Majors at center has a chance to be drafted semi-high, like probably 3rd round, 4th round. And then you have Devon Campbell coming back too, who I think has really high upsides going to play in the NFL, maybe gets in 1st round pick conversation. This team has to be able to exploit mismatches down the field with Amari Niblack, with Isaiah Bond, Silas Bold, DeAndre Moore, Ryan Niblett, Ryan Wingo, all those guys. So this team, I know Sark loves to run 12 personnel, 1 running back, 2 tight ends. I think they're going to see more 11 personnel. You may see some empty sets, honestly, and I'm perfectly fine with that if it is truly the strength. On paper, I think it's going to be, and I think he needs to exploit that going into next year. And defensively, it's going to be interesting. I think we're going to be more versatile. We're not going to be as good against the run because we were a top 5 unit last year with 2 absolute studs. Guys, Byron Murphy is being comped as high as a top 5 pick. I don't think he'll go that high, but I think that he slides at worst to like 16, 17. So he's going to be a top 20 pick in the NFL draft. I think I'm going to say this, even though mocks don't. I think we're going to have at least 2 guys drafted in the 1st round. Right now, we have 5 guys basically going in the first 2 rounds in Byron Murphy, Tavondre Sweat, Xavier Worthy, A.D. Mitchell, and Jatavian Sanders. I think someone's going to fall in love with one of the skilled position players in Jatavian Sanders, A.D. Mitchell, or Xavier Worthy at the end of the 1st round and take him. I think the Kansas City Chiefs could fall in love with Jatavian Sanders and take him late for a Travis Kelce replacement. But like Sark said, build around the strengths, and I think this strength is going to be passing and offense. I think this defense is going to take a slight step back in certain areas, like run defense, but I think it could actually be better pass defense-wise. So it's going to be very interesting, guys. We'll see what he ends up doing. Let's show him into the comments again real quick. I would like to see Sark rotate and get younger receivers in the game 100%. I think he's going to do that. He was asked that question today, and he basically said, you could see the hesitation. He's what he said is he's hoping that he'll be able to rotate more. What he's saying is, I need these guys to be ready. I can't just rotate for rotating's sake. If these guys are all ready, I'll get them in the game. And then, guys, if we can get 6 guys ready and we rotate with Quinn Ewers, knowing this offense, with this offensive line and these running backs, Texas should be in the SEC championship game if that's the case. It really should. I don't think that's delusional at all. I think at worst, they're a top 4 team. They're the 4th best team in the SEC. I think that's the worst case scenario. I think best case is 2nd. It's really hard for me to say we are as good as Georgia. Luckily, we will get to find that out because we play them. So it's going to be very interesting. But I agree with you, Corey. I think there needs to be more rotation. But the onus is on the players there. They have to be able to be good enough to rotate. There's no point of you run out your A team and then there's a gigantic drop-off from your backups to, like, let's say C level, and they come in just for the sake of coming in. That doesn't make any sense. If those guys can play most of the majority of the snaps and they're your 3 or 4 best guys, then keep playing them. But if you have 6 to 7 guys that you really like, rotate them at will because it keeps them fresh. And most teams don't have enough depth in the back end to keep their guys fresh that can match up with 6 to 7 guys. So I definitely understand your point, Corey, but the players have to be able to keep up as well. because I don't think Sark is the type of guy to be fixated on one thing or fixated on certain players. I think he is willing to rotate and learn from his mistakes. I've seen that from him. That's what I like about him. He's the total antithesis of Tom Herman. Tom Herman was the opposite. Tom Herman got super fixated on certain things and just kept bashing his head in the wall. I don't think that's Steve Sarkisian. From year to year, I see changes. Now, I will say in his year, he really doesn't change much, but in the offseason, he does grow. I've seen it from year 1 to year 2. I've seen it from year 2 to year 3. I'm hoping to see it from year 3 to year 4, because if he changes in certain aspects, that could be enough for us to win a national championship. Again, guys, please hit that like button. Please subscribe down below. I'm trying to grow this, guys. Please help me. Share it with your friends, family, aunts, uncles, cousins, neighbors, nephews, the random dude you met at the gym. Share it with anybody and everybody. I really appreciate it. Please hit that like button. Please subscribe. It is the Bleeding Burnt Orange live show here every Wednesday with your host, Matthew Miller. Please hit that like button. Please subscribe on both the SEC channel at MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, and the Texas channel at the voice of college football. Thank you guys for that. I really, really appreciate it. Now that you are in the SEC, how do you look at the Big 12? I love that question, Joey. I like the Big 12 still. I'm still going to be affiliated with the Big 12 because that is the conference Texas has been in my whole life. I have no ill will. I'm in the minority of Texas fans with the Big 12. I think the commissioner could have handled certain aspects better, but I have no hate. I'm going to watch Big 12 football. I'm going to enjoy Big 12 football. I think, honestly, it makes it more interesting. I think the Big 12 next year, or I wouldn't say next year, the Big 12 in like 3 to 4 years is going to be the most interesting conference. I think the SEC and Big 10, the shine is going to wear off in a year or two because you're going to realize it's only going to be 4 to 5 teams every year that can really compete. I think in the Big 12, every one of almost half that league, it could win the Big 12, half of it. And you're never going to be able to say that about any other conference. So I'm really excited to watch that. Of course, I think they're the best basketball conference, and losing Texas and Oklahoma, I don't think changes that, because you brought in BYU, you brought in UCF, you brought in Houston, and you brought in Cincinnati, and they're still going to be very good at basketball. So that's going to be fun to watch as well. So I have no hate towards the Big 12, Joey. I'm looking forward. I think West Virginia, if they hit their ceiling, could be in that Big 12 championship game next year. I think there's like I said, 8 or 9 teams that could be in the Big 12 championship game. I think this year was an example. If Texas didn't exist, think about and Oklahoma, think about the possibilities what the Big 12 championship game could have been. I think we all knew going into the season Texas was going to be there and who was going to go play them. I predicted Kansas, and guess what? I think if Jalen Daniels stays healthy, they're in. Hell, I think if Jason Bean would have stayed healthy for the games he missed, they would have been there. So I'm proud of my prediction for that too, because I was one of very few people to say Kansas was going to win 9 games last year, and they did that. So they had a great year. I think the Big 12 is going to be really fun. Like I said, I can't wait to watch it. I love football, so I'm going to watch almost every conference. But if I'm ranking conferences to watch, I'm watching SEC, Big 12, Big 10, and then ACC, I guess. ACC is way down there, honestly. That conference does not entertain me whatsoever. But I would watch the Big 12 over the Big 10. I don't like the Big 10 style of football. I think it's going to be very interesting with Oregon coming in and their style of football, with USC coming in and their style of football, Washington with Jeb Fish and them coming in with their style of football. I think that will be interesting, and I'll definitely watch those crossover games. But I still don't care about a Michigan State Iowa game. Like, I could give 2 craps about that. I really could. It's not fun to watch. It's going to be hard not to root for the Big 12. Yeah, I agree. I think, listen, guys, I don't want this to become the NFL, and we're approaching that territory, and we're not there yet. But with the unionization that could possibly happen, and then you have 2 super leagues, that's basically could be the AFC and NFC. I don't like that. I watch college football because it's different than the NFL. I have fallen out of love with the NFL, guys. I'm going to be straight up honest with you. The last thing to tie me to the NFL was Peyton Manning. Once he retired, I have slowly but certainly lost interest, and I'm going to continue to probably lose interest in the NFL. So I'm hoping college doesn't go that way, because then, honestly, guys, I guess I'm stuck with baseball because I have no interest in watching the NBA regular season. I'll tune into a couple games here and there, and then I'll watch the playoffs. But baseball is like, and college football, that's it for me, guys. That's really all I watch now. I'll watch the Super Bowl. I'll watch some playoff games. But overall, the product of the NFL, because of multiple reasons, has just gotten worse. And I'm hoping college is not turning into that. Per ESPN, the Big 12 has 6 teams in the top 25 returning production. The Big 12 will be tough this year. 100%. That is a very important stat. Texas is very high. I think they're one of the 3 or 4 highest that ranked in last year's top 25 returning production. That's why I think Texas is going to do very good next year going to the SEC. I think a lot of people are delusional. And basically, I'll call them this. They're T-shirt SEC fans. They're guys that watch a couple games a year and think the SEC is the end-all, be-all, and they think Texas, oh, you're going to come in here and you're going to dominate. You're going to have 6 to 7 wins. That's what's really going to happen. No, it's not. Well, I would be shocked if Texas finishes with anything less than 9 wins next year in the SEC. I'd be shocked. If you were to pick one game next year, who do you have if you were to pick one game next year, who do you have Texas winning? I can't watch the NFL anymore. So I saw that on Twitter as well, Corey. I picked Georgia. If Texas beats Georgia, we have reached a level that has not been accomplished around here since we left the national championship field in 2009. Because at that point, guys, I think we're going to beat Michigan next year. If we beat Georgia, I think we're undefeated and we're ranked number 1 in the country. When's the last time you could say that as Texas? I think the last time is 2009. And I don't even know if we were ranked number 1 at any point then. It might have been 2008. Might have been later. I don't know. But that's why I want to beat Georgia. I think it puts us up into like a stratosphere we have not been into in a very, very long time. And I think it's paramount that if we did win that game, we take advantage of it. You cannot have a down week next week after the Georgia game, whoever you're playing. I don't think we're going to win that game because I think Georgia is the best team in the country. I think we're in that second tier right behind them with Ohio State and Texas. Guys, it would shock me at this point if Georgia, Ohio State, and Texas, two of those 3 are going to play in the national championship. I'm very confident in saying that. I really believe that. If you have money, I'd just throw $100 on each of them. You will win. I don't see Oregon winning the national championship, even though they're probably the 4th, and I just don't see Ole Miss. I do not trust Lane Kiffin. I just don't. I haven't seen him win a big game at Ole Miss yet. Now, has he had the talent that the other teams, like in Alabama's had? No, but I just don't see it happening. We have a favorable schedule other than Georgia, and it's in Austin, 100%, but it's still the best team in the country, so it's going to be interesting. What about Oregon? Like I said, Corey, have them as the 4th best team right now. I think Texas could win the SEC year 1. Georgia is the only roadblock, but I think you are capable of beating them. It will be interesting. It's basically, to me, going to come down to, can Quinn Ewers take that next step? If you're telling me Quinn Ewers takes the next step from being a 3rd, 4th round pick to a 1st round pick, we can beat anyone. We can beat anyone. That really is what it comes down to. Guys, Texas was a more talented football team than Washington. Washington had Michael Penix, and Michael Penix played out of his mind because Michael Penix has 1st-round capabilities, and he played to them. Quinn Ewers has those capabilities. He has yet to play to them. Other than Alabama, both years, I haven't seen 1st-round caliber NFL throws from Quinn Ewers. Those are the only 2 games. If he can play to that, Texas can win the national championship. I think that's what it comes down to. If he's just going to be who he was last year, I think this team will basically be the same. They'll probably win 1 playoff game, lose in the 2nd round, and that's all she wrote. If he can take that step, I think there's a real possibility we see Texas in the national championship. I can look, but who does Georgia play the week before Texas? We play OU. Yeah, that's another thing too. I think we have a bye. Do we have a bye before or after OU, Corey? I know it's either before or after OU. I don't know who Georgia plays before. I haven't looked at their schedule. Like I said, I looked at Texas' schedule last week. I predicted it obviously very early. I predicted 10-2 for Texas. I believe the loss was to Georgia and Kentucky at home. Those were the 2 losses I had. I'll jump over to our next topic because I did want to talk about this SEC coaching ranking. So I saw a lot of people throw this out there. In general, just ranking coaches all across the nation. I just wanted to focus on the SEC, and we can jump into it right away. Guys, number 1 is, come on, let's be honest with everyone. Number 1 is clear. It's cut. It is Kirby Smart. He is the number 1 coach in the country and definitely the SEC. 94-16 overall, 9-2 in bowl games, 5-1 in the college football playoff, 2 national championships. If there's going to be another Nick Saban, this is the guy. He's at a great recruiting hotbed with a state that's only getting better in recruiting. He's a fantastic recruiter and defensive coordinator. They're pushing guys out to the NFL like crazy. They have good NIL, not great, but good NIL. And I mean, he's the best coach. They're the best program going forward right now in the country. Number 1. Now, number 2, I think there's a debate. Between 2, 3, and 4, there's going to be a debate for this spot. I put Kalen DeBoer. People are going to hate on that, but the dude's 104-12, which is insane. He's coached at Sioux Falls, Fresno, Washington, and now Alabama, and all he has done at every stop prior to Alabama is win. 104-12 is insane. I don't care what level it came at. I know he went 17-2 in the NAIA playoffs, which again is insane. This guy just wins. He took over a terrible situation in Washington with Jimmy Lake, who somehow is a defensive coordinator in the NFL now. Don't get me started on that for the Falcons. And he did a great job. He cleaned it up. It went from a dumpster fire to 10 wins. Then he gets to a national championship, and now he's at Alabama. I have him as the second best coach. Guys, this is a combination of your past, your present, and your future all combined, and that is why I have him at 2, because his past is damn good, his present's looking damn good, and I think he'll be able to do well at Alabama if they give him a shot. I think he's going to win 9 to 10 games a year, get you in the playoff, maybe win a national championship every once in a while. Is he going to do what Nick Saban did? No, because nobody's Nick Saban. And even when I said Kirby Smart could be the next Nick Saban, there's a small chance that he does. There's a big chance he doesn't. There's a good chance he probably wins a national championship every 6 years, which is still freaking fantastic. But Nick Saban was doing it every 3 and basically getting in 1 every 2 out of 3 years. So I just don't see that happening. But I do think if anyone could do it, it is Kirby Smart. Next up, this is where, like I said, this group of 2, 3, 4. Texas fans may hate me for this. I'm going to put Brian Kelly. He's 283-103. He's 8-5 in bowl games. He's coached at Central Michigan, Cincy, and LSU. He's won everywhere he's gone. He just cannot win the big games. Can't get over the hump. But he has a better track record than Sark, and he hasn't gotten to a national championship game. Brian Kelly has. He's also gotten to the playoff multiple times. That's why I'm at 3. Plus, the staff he just hired, it would shock me if he fails at LSU. If he fails at LSU, like I said, it would shock me. In this list, I would have done a terrible job on it because that would make him fall to me like 10 or 11. If you can't win at LSU, it's really hard to win anywhere. I mean, my God, Ed Orgeron won a national championship. Les Miles won a national championship. So, Brian Kelly, you have to make it to college football playoff. You have to get to a top 4. In my opinion, you should win a national championship. So, he's done a good job. Can he start to win the big games? We'll see. Steve Sarkisian, number 4. 25-14 as a head coach, 2-4 in bowls, 0-1 in the college football playoff. Listen, I think his trajectory could skyrocket after this year. I have no issue if he does what I think he can do to putting him at number 2 and going into next year. But for right now, with his record and everything, he really only has one great year. He has a couple other good years that I think people sleep on, but only one great year. So I have to put him at 4. And that's where I have him. Next up, I think this is where you drop down again to another tier. And I think you can debate 5 and 6, and then we'll talk about the next tier after that. Number 5 is Lane. Lane's gone 94-49, which is better than I thought he has as a head coach in college football. He's 3-4 in bowls, Tennessee, USC, FAU, and Ole Miss. Guys, he's gone all in this year. He's gone all in, and everything tells me it's this year or it's bust for Lane Kiffin. To me, you've gone all in. You've paid people. You've gotten really good recruits, really good transfer portal class. You have to. This team has to make the college football playoff, and they have to, in my opinion, win one playoff game. If you do that, it's a successful season. Anything on top of that is icing on the cake, and you have to prove it. It's the same situation as Brian Kelly, except Brian Kelly has a longer track record of sustained success of 10-plus win seasons. You can win 10 games. You've proven that. Back-to-back years at Ole Miss. Can you actually beat teams that might be slightly better than you? Can you outcoach them? So far, that has been a no. He hasn't done that. You saw Sark do it versus Alabama. I think Alabama had slightly more talent than Texas this year, and it was on the road at a very hard place to play, and he outcoached Nick Saban in that game. He really did. Lane Kiffin has yet to do that. Lane Kiffin has had his shot versus teams that are slightly better, and let's be honest, Alabama was reeling. They could have beaten Alabama, and they played like absolute crap in that game. So, Lane Kiffin, this is a prove year for me. You have to be a Final 8 team in this sport. Otherwise, I'm going to stop taking you seriously, and the rest of the sport should as well, because this roster is good enough. It's a top 10 roster in college football. If you're a top 5 coach in the SEC and one of the 10 best in the country, go and win a playoff game. That's my goal for you this year, and that's the goal of Ole Miss, or what it should be. Next up is Eli Drinkowitz. Guys, he was almost fired up until this year, and then they won, 11 games, and including the Cotton Bowl versus Ohio State. He's 40-22 overall, 1-2 at bowls, 1 year at App State, and the rest at Missouri. This is all based on the future. They're recruiting very well right now. They returned Brady Cook at quarterback, Theo Weiss, and that absolute freak Luther Burden at wide receiver. This team should be in the top 4 in the SEC. Right now, guys, in my opinion, it should be Georgia, Texas, Ole Miss, and Missouri, with Alabama somewhere rotating between there. So those 5 teams are the top 5 in the SEC. I think you have one at Georgia, and I could see Texas being 2, Alabama being 2, Ole Miss being 2, Missouri being 2, mostly based off schedule. If I went off town, I put Texas at 2. But because of schedule, talent, coaching, and everything, Missouri could make the SEC championship game, and it would not shock me. I think it's similar to Lane Kiffin. I think Missouri has to make the college football playoff this year. You have too much returning talent, too much incoming talent. You have to make the college football playoff. I will say this, though. It's a little bit lower than Ole Miss. I don't think you have to win a game. Get to the college football playoff. That's the next step for them. So I have Eli Drinkwitz at 6. And why we're at 6. Well, we'll actually go to 8, and then I'll jump back into your comments. Number 7 is Mike Elko. Mike Elko did a fantastic job at Duke. He went 16-9, 1-0 in bowls. At Duke, that's really good. That is a basketball school, and he managed to win games at a basketball school that he shouldn't have won. Beat Clemson opening week of the season with far less talent. His defensive scheme is fantastic. I think that's going to translate. I think A&M is going to be way better than they were under him than they were Jimbo, because I think he's willing to actually build a culture where I think Jimbo Fisher wanted to buy a culture. And I think that's going to work way better. He did real guys, I think if Riley Leonard doesn't get hurt, they beat Florida State. They were in that game until Riley Leonard got hurt. They were about to score and go up in that game until Riley Leonard got hurt. And you're talking about a top 5 team in the country, top 6 team in the country, with an basically probably like the 60th best roster in the country. And Mike Elko almost had them beat on the road. I think it's a good hire. I am as the 7th coach. He just has to prove it a little bit more to me. I don't expect them to be great this year, guys. I think they'll be 6-6. They don't have a lot of talent. It's a more talented league. And I don't think you just outcoach everybody in this league like you can in the ACC, especially with the far less talent that you have. The talent gap is just way wider between A&M at this point and all the other teams because of the transfer. What's happened? They've been decimated by the transfer portal. So unless you can get those 25 plus guys that they got in the transfer portal and bring them together and coach them up in the offseason, I just don't see them better as a 6-6 team. Next up, guys, in my opinion, the most underrated coach in the SEC, Mark Stoops. The guy wins 7 games a year, basically, at Kentucky every year. Kentucky, before him, was terrible. They weren't good at all. Again, a basketball school, and he's done a good job. He has hit the ceiling of Kentucky football. Kentucky football is a 7-8 win team at best most years. So he's done a great job there. I think A&M would have been fine hiring him too. I think Mike Elko is a slightly better version of him, but not much. I think Mark Stoops is very underrated, and he'd be higher on this list if he was at a better school. But I think he's maxed out Kentucky, and I think, unfortunately for him, he's guilty. He's going to be fired at some point because of the expectations that he's put on the team. He's outperformed what most Kentucky coaches do, and eventually they get tired of you winning 7 games because they expect more, and there's really nothing more for you to deliver there. So I just expect him to get fired at some point. I think he's a really good coach. He'll bounce back. Anybody would be lucky to have him. He's a very good coach, and he has the number 8 coach in the country for me, or number 8 coach in the SEC for me. Number 9. A guy that I think can climb a bunch this year is Josh Heupel. It's been a lot of inconsistency. He's 55-20, 3-3 in bowls between UCF and Tennessee. I really like his offensive scheme. You saw what he was able to do when he had Jalen Hyatt and Hendon Hooker and those guys at Tennessee. They had a very good year. If Nico can come in at the quarterback position and solidify that and play somewhere in the Hendon Hooker territory and not be Joe Milton, I think they have a real shot at competing in the SEC. I don't think they're going to make the SEC championship game, but do I think they could be the 4th or 5th best team in the SEC? Yeah, I do. And I think he's an underrated coach. In fact, I think this league is full of really good coaches, because the next guy I'm going to talk about, will actually jump into your comments and then talk about him, but it's crazy that I have him as the 10th best coach. Georgia plays Mississippi State the week before Texas. Okay, so they get a bye, basically. I wonder if game day will go to the Red River rivalry matchup and then Texas UGA. That'd be crazy, back-to-back weeks. I would hate to have Georgia's schedule, no weeks off. Yeah, Florida's got the hardest schedule. Florida's got an insane schedule. It's probably the hardest schedule I've ever seen in college football. Michigan also has a very hard schedule. I haven't really looked at Georgia's schedule overall. Brian Kelly can win the big games in the regular season, but he can't win the big games in the postseason. Yeah, that's what I meant, Jackson. I'm talking, I don't think there's any big games in the regular season anymore. Yes, there's exciting and fun games, but with the amount of games you have, you can lose 2 to 3 games and make the college football playoff now. I don't think there's any, oh my God, this is a make or break game. There's just not going to be that many of those. It comes down to winning postseason games. So Brian Kelly, you have to win those. If Napier, well, he has to. I'm ranking every SEC coach. So Billy Napier is going to be on the list. He's going to be low on the list, but he's going to be on the list. A&M will play Texas like it's 100%. I fully expect that to be a good game. Being in College Station, first game in over a decade, so I think it'll be a good game. But I just don't think A&M's that good. Elko needs to add some. Nico needs to add some muscle. He won't make it with the season with that frame. Yeah, he is skinny, but he's one of those guys. If you've watched him, I mean, in the Iowa game, he was really impressive to me. He was smart. He knew when to get rid of it, knew when to get out of bounds, knew all that. So if he does that, he'll be fine. But he is skinny. Okay, so next up is Hugh Freeze. This one was hard for me because this guy did a great job at Ole Miss, but the problem was, guys, he was basically having NIL before NIL existed, so he kind of got an unfair advantage in that aspect, but he beat Nick Saban twice. I think he's the only guy to beat Nick Saban other than, I think, Kirby Smart twice, so that's really impressive for me. It's going to be interesting, and Gus Malzahn did it a couple times too, but being at Ole Miss, beating Alabama twice, fantastic job by him. I mean, I have him at 10, but he could rise. Him and Heupel to me can rise up very high. I think if Heupel and Hugh Freeze do good work at Auburn this year, you could see them I could put them in the top 5. So we'll see. Like I said, if Hugh Freeze is your 9th, 10th best coach in the SEC, you have a lot of good coaches in the SEC. Next up, I think there's a drop off after this, guys, between 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. Brent Venables. This isn't hate. This is just reality. He's 16-10. He's 0-2 in bowl games. He has done average at Oklahoma at this point. He's done exactly what I thought he would do. He's not going to be Lincoln Riley. I know Lincoln Riley inherited a better circumstance than Brent Venables did, but Lincoln Riley still did better than him. Obviously, Bob Stoops has done way better at this point than he has, and I think Oklahoma is going to struggle this year, guys. Their schedule's a little bit harder than Texas, and they don't have they have a new quarterback. They have a bunch of new offensive linemen. I know they brought in some good transfers. Their wide receiver core their defense is They lost Jeff Lebby. This is a 7-win team next year to me, guys. And I think Brent Venables, if he wins less than 8 games, or 7 games this year, then I think he's not the guy. Like if they go 6-6, just cut cord. Just cut the cord. He's not that good if he goes 6-6. They need to win 7, 8 games, in my opinion. If he wins 8 games, I will be impressed with that schedule and that roster. Winning 8 games with that schedule is going to be a good job, and I would bump him up in the rankings, but I just don't see that happening. I think they're a 6 or 7-win team, honestly. Next up, Shane Beamer, 17-14, 1 in bowls overall. This was his head-scratching hire when it happened, and so far he's done He's done what South Carolina has been doing for a long time, other than the old ball coach down there, Steve Spurrier, before and after him. This is basically what you get Shane Beamer. You get 7 wins a year, 6 to 7 wins a year, and that's what he is. He's okay. Like I said, I think there's a big drop-off after Hugh Freeze. You go from the Hugh Freeze to Brett Venables or Shane Beamer, and then next up, you have to rank him. I know Red Bean, but you're ranking Billy Napier at 13. The reason I have him at 13 is because what he did at Louisiana. I have to count that. He was 51-26 overall, 2-2 in bowls. The guy is a good coach. The problem is I think he's in over his head. I don't think he's a good coach at the Division I, Power 5, Power 4 level now. Like, could I see him as a lower tier Big 12 school coach? Actually, yeah, I think that'd be perfect for him if he went and coached Arizona State. I think he'd kill it there. I know Kenny Dillingham's there now, but I think that's the type of school Billy Napier, like that's his ceiling. That's where he should coach. He should never coach any higher than that. Louisiana, he was definitely too good for, but Florida is way too big of a job for him. He struggled. He lost most of that great recruiting class. We took a couple guys. Everyone else took a couple guys, and he's really struggled at Florida. Watching that Utah game last year was so sad, guys. That reminded me so much of like Charlie Strong, Tom Herman early on. Tom Herman was better than that later on, of just procedural penalties, stupid play calls. But overall, I think he's a good coach. He's just not a good coach for the SEC. I have him as the 13th best coach in the SEC. People are going to say, oh, really? Who do you have below him? I mean, Clark Lee. You could argue and debate Clark Lee over Billy Napier. I would be willing to listen to that. I think 15-16 for me are locked in. But Clark Lee, 9-27 overall. He went 2-10, 5-7, 2-10. Vanderbilt's almost impossible, guys. It's like it's like Rutgers, but in the SEC and a little bit harder to win at. I mean, guys, think about it. Greg Schiano's a very good coach, winning at Rutgers. James Franklin's the same thing. Why he got the Penn State job? James Franklin was winning 7 to 8 games a year at Vanderbilt. 7 to 8 games a year. That is phenomenal. Unless you're a really good football coach, you're not going to win that many games. Clark Lea's an average coach, and this is what an average coach does at Vanderbilt. He wins average, if you average that out, 9 games, he's winning 3 games a year. Like, that's what an average coach does. They win 3 to 4 games a year there. That is a terrible program. That's why I'm at 14, because I think he's better than these two guys. They're just in better situations. And one guy who I have as the worst coach in the SEC hasn't coached yet. So that's why he's there. But next up is Sam Pittman. Sam Pittman had one good year. Second season, he went 9-4. Ever since then, it's been disappointing. He's 23-25 overall, 2-0 in bowls. That also counts as Hutchinson Community College head coaching record. And let's be honest here, that's probably where he belongs. He's not an SEC coach. I don't even think he's a Division I head football coach, honestly. I think he's a very good offensive line coach. I think he's a nice guy. But if you want to win seriously at a big level, Sam Pittman cannot be your head football coach. And I think Arkansas is going to learn that this year. I think they'll fire him halfway through the season. I actually think 2 or 3 of these guys will be fired about halfway through. I think Pittman, Billy Napier will both be fired halfway through. And I think there's a good chance Shane Beamer will be too. Because Spencer Rattler is no longer to bail you out offensively. And then last, just because he hasn't coached, like if he had coached a little bit, I probably would put him at 13. Jeff Lebby hasn't coached. He's been an okay offensive coordinator. I honestly didn't like the hire because I don't like him as an offensive coordinator. I think he benefits from the scheme he coaches. The conferences he's been in and the players he's had have been better than most everyone else. When you coach at UCF, when they're the AAC, you're going to have better players than the AAC. You're going to have better players in the Big 12 when you have Oklahoma, and he hasn't done great with them. Scoring-wise, those teams don't really score. They move the ball a lot, guys, but they really struggle in the red area because it's high tempo, catch in space offense, and guess what? That doesn't work in the red zone. So I think it's a bad hire. I think, honestly, go hire like Paul Johnson and run the triple option because that's your best option. Dan Mullen tapped out the Mississippi State. Like what Mississippi State was under Dan Mullen is the best it will ever be. So congratulations on Jeff Lebby. I guess I'm as the 16th best coach in the SEC. You mentioned James Franklin. He is over his head at Penn State. I don't think he's over his head. He's winning 10 games, 11 games a year if you include the bowl game, and they're going to make the college football playoff. Like if he does that every year now, 10, 11 wins, you're in the college football playoff. So I think if you're talking about programs, the 12-team playoff helps Penn State and James Franklin the most. Do I agree James Franklin is he's not a top 5 coach. He's probably in the 10 to 15 range. He's 100% a top 15 coach in the country. 100%, guys. Let's look at the history of Penn State. Joe Paterno did very good there, but at the end, wasn't that good. James Franklin has taken them to that next level and kept them right under of what Joe Paterno was doing because Joe Paterno was competing for national championships. He's in that second tier of you're competing for high-end bowl games. He's a good coach. He's just not who Penn State wants him to be, but he is a good coach. Who does OU bring in? Because I agree BV isn't it for them. I think you should hire Josh Heupel if he'll take it. You're both in the conference now. I don't know if he'd take that job, though. I think there's some bad blood there because he was looked over the last time this was open. They didn't really interview him, so it'd be interesting. But that'd be my number one candidate. I don't know where I'd go from there, but he'd be far and away my number one candidate. It will be interesting. I think that's going to do it for me tonight, guys. I really appreciate you guys being here. This was the 32nd edition of the Bleeding Burnt Orange live show with your host, Matthew Miller. Please hit the like button. Please subscribe down below. Again, Wednesday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time for the 33rd edition next week, the 14th, Valentine's Day. Hit that like button. Subscribe down below. Peace out, guys. Hook 'em. Thank you for showing up.